Define the relationship. Now, that's a term I first heard, a phrase I heard probably 5 or 6 years ago when I read the book Not a Fan by Kyle Idleman. And probably some of you remember that phrase as well in that study because we did it in here at the church in a sermon series and also in a study. There always comes a time. What is define the relationship? There always comes a time in a couple's life where they have the define the relationship talk. And the very earliest days of that, some of you remember this, is when you were in grade school and you liked somebody. Guys, you know how it was, we would write on a piece of paper, I like you, do you like me? Check yes or no, maybe. And that was define the relationship. We got to know where this thing's heading here. And as we get older, we had those talks when you would start dating someone, that you would have that talk eventually, where are we going with this thing? Is there a future here? Are we thinking the same things? Define the relationship is a talk that's very pivotal in every relationship because it sets the boundaries. It tells if we're on the same road, if we have the same goals. It clarifies expectations for that relationship. It's very, very important in the life of a relationship. And in this last message that we're doing, where we have been talking about the Jesus-centered or the gospel-centered church. The last message in that series today, I want to choose a define the relationship or a DTR talk that Jesus had with his disciples. And that's how I want to finish things up here. These disciples who had been traveling, at this point he has this talk 3 years with Jesus. They had seen him perform miracles. They had heard his teachings. They had seen him heal people, raise people from the dead. But Jesus saw the need to have a define the relationship talk to make sure that we're all on the same page. Now, we're going to be looking in Matthew chapter 16, and that's where we're going to spend all of our time. If you want to be turning there in your Bibles, it'll be on the screen as well. But in this DTR conversation in Matthew 16, we're going to see that Jesus reveals 3 important things. He reveals his identity, and make sure that they understand that. His mission, and make sure they understand that. But it also defines what makes a disciple of Jesus. And as always, we're going to see that it wasn't just pivotal for these people. It's pivotal for us in our relationship with God. So let's get started with that. Matthew 16, verse 13 starts. We're going to look at Jesus' identity. Verse 13 says this. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, who do people say the Son of Man is? Setting means a lot. Timing means a lot. When we choose to do something, how it means something to us. Parents, you know this, that you choose a teaching moment when you want to teach your children. Now, the setting here and the timing is very important. Jesus has just gone through another one of those deals with the religious leaders where they're trying to trip him up. They're trying to, make him look bad in front of the people. So they're throwing all these questions at Jesus, and Jesus answers them back. But you see, they're not buying what Jesus is selling. They're just not having anything to do with it. Jesus chooses to go off to a region, to withdraw for a while. And he goes away, and he takes his disciples with him. And they go to an area known as Caesarea Philippi. And this area is a town that is a city that is steeped in pagan worship. To go there, you would see the statues and the temple. Herod the Great had built a temple there in honor of the pagan god Pan or Pan. It was a center point of this city. Now, get the idea. In the midst of a city like this, where there's false gods and temples and statues, Jesus asked that question: who do people say that I am? Who is the Son of Man? Verse 14, look there. It says, they replied, some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. Now, I don't know about you, but if somebody compared me to John the Baptist, I'd be going, yeah, that's pretty good, because he was a great guy. He goes on, he said, some say you're Elijah. Elijah was thought to be one of the greatest, if not the greatest prophet of the Old Testament. I would be, that's a great compliment. I'd be happy if somebody says that. He names Jeremiah, another great prophet who said some so important things and hard teachings about Jesus, never backed down. And there were plenty of legends in the Jewish life that said Jeremiah was going to come back from the dead before the Messiah came. So when Jesus showed up, they were thinking, it might be Jeremiah come back to life. And some people said, I don't know exactly who he is, but he's just like one of the prophets we've heard about all our lives. Now, all of those would be compliments. But Jesus isn't satisfied with that. That was the easy question. To say, who do people think that I am? That's like me asking you, well, what have you heard? You're just reporting. You're not revealing your heart. And Jesus says, there's one more question. So he goes on, verse 15. He says, but what about you? He asked, who do you say I am? Simon Peter answered, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Now this question is directed to the whole group, but in keeping with Simon Peter's personality, he's the first one. He jumps right and answers, you're the Christ, the Son of the living God. His answer is brilliant. It's probably Simon Peter's greatest moment. It's right on the money. You see, Christ in Greek is the equivalent of the Hebrew word Messiah, the anointed one. That's what that means. He said, so Peter was saying, you're the anointed one. You're the Messiah. You're the Christ. You're the one that we've read all our lives about in the Old Testament scriptures that's coming. You're it. He says, you're the Son of the living God. Now, once again, it's important to remember the setting. They're in Caesarea Philippi, and who knows that they're not in the shadow of that great temple to Pan or Pon. And Simon Peter's saying, you're the Son of the living God. It's almost implying you're not like any of these statues. They're just statues. They're not living, but you're Son of the living God. Look at verse 17. Jesus replied, blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by man, but my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. Now, much has been written about these two verses here. There's great deals, volumes written about this here. Just for no extra charge. The Catholic Church believes that this sets the precedent for the Pope. And Simon Peter was the first Pope, and they choose a Pope ever since. No scripture anywhere backs that up, but that's what the Catholic Church believes. Some believe that Jesus is saying, I'm going to build my church on you, Peter. And it's true that Peter preached the first gospel sermon. He was there on the day of Pentecost. He was the first to say this. And others say that he wasn't talking about Peter, but talking about what Peter said. And that's what the church would be built on. Now, I know what I believe, and what I believe that the Bible is talking there. But here's the point. To get hung up on all of those discussions is to miss the whole point. To get hung up on that discussion is to miss the point here. The point is this. Jesus is looking at Simon Peter and saying, that's it. You nailed it, Simon Peter. That's exactly who I am. I am the Son of God. I am the promised Messiah. I am the Christ. You realize this is the first mention of the church in the New Testament, first mention of church anywhere. And the Greek word is not a religious word. It's a word that was used in common Greek language. It would be used to say we're going to have a meeting of the town council. That's that calling out. That's what that means, the calling out. But Jesus is establishing the identity of the church, the assembly of the followers of Jesus Christ. And you notice this, in the midst of all the discussion of what Jesus was saying there, Jesus clears it up when he says, I will build my church. I will build it. He establishes right on the coattails of Peter's saying what your identity is, Jesus, he establishes the identity of the church. Define the relationship. Jesus first says you need to know who I am. We can't go any further until you recognize who I am. John the Baptist, yes, I'm a great man like John the Baptist. One of the prophets, yes, I am a prophet. But I am so much more than a good man. I am so much more than a prophet. And you either accept who I am in totality, or you accept nothing about me. You can't say I'm just a good man. You can't say I'm a good speaker. I'm everything. You can take all of me, and you can take for what the church is, or you can have none of it, because that's my identity. You see, learning Jesus' identity enables us to find our identity. Let me point out what I mean. You're going to use this illustration. Let's pretend that you are a billionaire living in New York City. Billionaire living in New York City. You walk out and hail down a cab, and you have three $10 bills in your pocket. And you get in the cab, you take a short ride. He says the fare is $8. You give him 10, tell him to keep the change. A little bit later in the day, you put your hand in your pocket and you realize there's only one $10 bill. And you go, I either gave the cab driver 2 10s or I lost one. Now, you're a billionaire. What are you going to do? Are you going to call the police and put out a manhunt? You're going to call the cab company and say, I've got to find out who this driver is, find out if I gave him $10 too much. We have got to scour this city and find my $10. Are you going to do that? No. Because you're a billionaire. Because you're rich. Because that $10 is not going to make a difference in the quality of your life. And as Christians, when we recognize Jesus' identity, we find our identity. And we find out that we're rich. And so when somebody shortchanges you during the week, when they cut you off in traffic, you don't have to do anything back because I'm rich in Christ. What does it matter that they cut me off? When somebody mistreats you during the week, they say something to you, they don't give you the respect that you think you're due, and you feel like you've got to turn loose on them, you got to tear right into them, you stop and you say, I'm a child of the King. Can't be any richer than I am. I'm just going to let that go. It's not worth my time. It's not going to improve the quality of my life one bit. It's because you're rich, and you know you're rich. Jesus' identity can determine our identity. Let's keep going here. Jesus is going to reveal his mission, Jesus' mission, after he identifies his identity. Look at Matthew 16, skip down to verse 21. From that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, chief priests, and teachers of the law, and that he must be killed on the third day and be raised, on the third day be raised to life. Jesus moves the conversation from identity to mission. He, in so many words, is saying, now that it's settled who I am, and you know who I am, let's get down to business. Let's get down to work. He says from that time on, this was a pivotal point. This defined the relationship, made a turn in their relationship. It says from that time on, he began to tell them. He didn't just tell them, it says he explained to them. He spent time to talk to them that he was going to Jerusalem to suffer, to die. This had to be a shock. After talking about being the Son of God, the Messiah, the Anointed One, and all of a sudden just start talking over and over again about I've got to go suffer and die. I've got to go to Jerusalem. This was a shock to these guys. This was a complete turnaround. Look at verse 22. Peter took them aside and began to rebuke them. Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. Never, Lord, he said, this shall never happen to you. Peter's confusion and his shock and his frustration boils over. Now get this. This is how you and I work. He had just pointed out, professed to Jesus, you are the Son of God. You are the Messiah. You are the Christ. You are the one we've been looking for. Now let me tell you how to do your job. Really, and that's what he was doing. He said, no, this will never happen to you. He said, I'll never let this happen. See, that's why it's not only important to know Jesus' identity, but also to understand his mission. Another way of saying this is to know Jesus as your Savior, but also as your King, your Lord. And too many times we make this same mistake. We love the church. We love Jesus. But we don't get in line or in tune with the mission of Jesus and the mission of the church. How many preachers have been fired in churches across America because they tried to lead their congregation on a change that would lead them to obeying the mission, the Great Commission? How many churches that are dying today because they won't accept the mission of the church, that the church isn't for them, but it's for bringing people to Christ? How many ministers and people have been forced to leave their churches because they brought different people? People weren't like everybody else there, different colors, different backgrounds to people in the church, and then they weren't accepted. How many churches is barely getting by because they've abandoned the mission of Jesus? One is too many. And we know it's much more than that. Jesus turned, look at verse 23. Jesus turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the things of God, but the things of men." Now this is a harsh rebuke of a man who had just told him, "You are the Son of the living God." It shocks us. You imagine how it would shock Simon Peter. And to be standing there and to hear Jesus say that to Peter. You've been in those situations where maybe some tension was going on right next to you and how uncomfortable it makes you. This would have been an uncomfortable situation to be in. But this was another define the relationship moment that Jesus could not ignore. Jesus knew he wasn't Satan, but Satan means adversary. And he is saying, get out of my way. That's probably the best way we could say this. Jesus looked Simon Peter in the face and said, get out of my way. You're between me and what I came to do. Get out of the way. You've probably had some moments like that in your life yourself, where you had to tell people to get out of your way. Consider the mission statement of this well-known university. This is a well-known university. This is their mission statement. To be plainly instructed and consider well that the main end of your life and studies is to know God and Jesus Christ. Founded in 1636, this university employed exclusively Christian professors, emphasized the character formation of its students, and above all else placed a strong emphasis on training preachers to share the good news. Every diploma had these words, truth for Christ and the church. You've probably heard of this school. It's called Harvard University. If you look at Harvard University today, it contains nothing that resembles its mission statement. It slowly drifted from its mission and what we call mission shift. Peter's mistake was born out of love, not evil, but it was wrong nonetheless. And Jesus loved Peter, but he knew he would not allow him to get in his way. And there are people today who love Jesus, but can't accept his mission. There are people who love the church, but they can't accept his mission. And to do that, Jesus lovingly but forcefully says, get out of my way. And we need to listen to that message as much as Simon Peter did. One more point, one more clarification here of define the relationship we need to make. And that concerns what makes a disciple of Jesus. Jesus saying, no, you know who I am, you know what I'm here for, but now you need to be clear on what it takes to be a follower of mine. Skip down to verses 24 through 26. Then Jesus said to his disciples, if anyone would come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loves his life for me will find it. Loses his life for me will find it. What good will it be for a man if he gains the whole world yet forfeits his soul? Or what can a man give in exchange for his soul? It's like Jesus at this point, after all of this talk and these monumental things have happened, it's almost like Jesus says, okay, guys, come in close. Come here. Come in, get around close. I need to tell you something. And he tells them, if you're going to follow me, it's not always going to be good times. It's not always going to be the exciting miracles. It's not always going to be everybody loves you. It's not going to always be that things make sense. And it's going to be times that you're going to have to pick up the cross and carry it yourself. Luke, when he tells this, he says, take up your cross daily. And Jesus pulls his disciples in and tells them, are you with me? If you are, this is what it's going to take. And I need to know if you're with me to the end. You see, everything Jesus says here is upside down, at least the way we see it and the way our nature sees it. You know, taking up your cross, that was a very despicable picture. It was a despised way of death. It is not appealing. To give up everything is not appealing. To lose everything willingly is not appealing. The way to the top is climbing to the top, right? And taking no prisoners and working as hard as you have to. And if you have to step on some people along the way, then you do it. But then along comes Jesus and says, no, the way to the top is by being willing to serve. To be first, you must be willing to be last. The way to really living is to be willing to die. Now, how appealing is it to invite people to take up a cross, a symbol of death? But Jesus points out that even though, as bad as that sounds, he says it's not anything to comparison to the reward that you'll get. This invitation is to the individual, but it's to the church. And that's why I wanted to use this as our last message in the Jesus-centered church. This invitation is to the individual, but it is to the church as well. If a church wants to thrive instead of survive, we need to give up our plans. We need to take up his and be a gospel-centered church. The call is for the church's thinking and planning and structuring and operating and overall ministry is to reflect Jesus' identity and his mission. And then we will be known as followers of Jesus Christ. When we accept him and we accept his mission. John the Baptist could not have said it better. For the way to accomplish this difficult task in our hearts and in our churches is when he was asked about the popularity of Jesus growing and his popularity shrinking away. John the Baptist said it the best when he said this in John 3:30. He must become greater. I must become less. In another way, he says, he must increase. I must decrease. Those are some of the greatest words ever spoken. And if we are going to accomplish this, we don't need to read this too quickly and just skim over it. This is real. This is how we will be a Jesus-centered church. Will be the way we accept the mission of Jesus Christ. You see, in redefining the relationship, he defines for us the meaning of success. He defines for us the meaning of happiness and joy. And that is to abandon our ideas and our ideals and our dreams and follow Christ's ideals, his lives, his lines of reasoning, his mission. That's when we'll find purpose, and that's when we will find true happiness.